Hello everyone, welcome back. This is the gems and gearing portion of my mapping character that I made 3.17, taking a deep dive look into the decisions made there. That makes this part 2 of the video. Technically part 1 was all about the passive skill tree. I also showed a little bit about the jewels because they were right there in the passive skill tree. I do need to revisit the jewels a little bit on this video, but again, this primary focus will be on my decisions made with gearing, this tornado shot, raider, magic finder, as well as gem choices. I mentioned in the part 1 video there are some deviations from the meta, so to speak. It turns out, when I really think about it, this character is a little bit less meta than I even realized, especially when we take a look at the gearing choices and even some of the gemming choices as well. So first of all, I need to revisit something really quick because I failed to mention something kind of important in part 1. I did mention the Ascendancy choices that I made going Raider, but I didn't really address why I didn't do Deadeye, because the fundamental part of Tornado Shot with a Headhunter and all that, the fundamental meta aspect, if you will, is running Deadeye, not Raider. Almost nobody runs Raider with this type of character. The reason I chose to do Raider is because while the Deadeye has some very, very good Ascendancy choices, the Raider offers more speed. It just simply offers more speed. Whether you are stacking Frenzy charges and going for Avatar of the Slaughter, or if you are going the Onslaught route, which is what I did, and this will be very relevant to some of the gear choices I made. And then, as you're probably aware, if you don't pick Deadeye, then you cannot get Gathering Winds, which is the Tailwind aspect of that. Well, actually you can this season, because this is what I need to revisit the jewels. These were 2 jewels I did not actually showcase in part 1, whereas I probably should have, but here they are. Allocates Gathering Winds. Now, I initially took the Ascendancy point that gave you 2 extra projectiles, because that seemed like the obvious one. You know, that's so much extra damage, getting 2 more projectiles. It occurred to me that Headhunter buffs were giving me tons of projectiles anyway, so aside from the very initial combat point of every map, where I didn't have any buffs and it was for trying to make my first few kills, aside from that moment, it turns out for this build, plus projectiles, while it is very good and nice, isn't nearly as important as you might think it is. Now, of course, I've already talked about Headhunter a little bit in part 1, how there are some major changes going on. We don't know exactly what the changes are. I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, reading in the Arch Nemesis files, there was a mention of a projectile type, not just Deadeye, but another one that affected projectiles. Maybe that adds projectiles. Anyway, GGG is currently in the middle of updating the Arch Nemesis modifiers and making them perhaps a little more reminiscent of some of the previous ones. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we will get to have an increased projectiles variation of the Arch Nemesis Headhunter buff. However, of course, we all know that you can't make multiple copies, certainly not with just one item. It remains in question whether or not you can run multiple inspired learnings and have multiple of the same copy that way. Unknown, but for the time being here, I'm just going to focus a little bit on the gear and the gems, but very quickly getting this out of the way. That one of the reasons I chose Raider, because the movement speed, they're just simply more movement speed. Because even if I go Deadeye and then I take, say, Avatar of the Chase, well, unfortunately, Onslaught's not up 100% of the time. That is, unless I run Onslaught Synth Boots. And if I do that, then I can't run one of the best Magic Find items in the entire game, which is Goldworm. So, all those things considered, part of the reason, and obviously, you know, the Ascendancy choices are all really good for Raider as well. I can kind of get around Ricochet by just going chain support. The marks thing, I can just simply not really worry that much about marks in general to get around that one. And again, you know, I'm tanky enough, so marks aren't super important, getting that extra tankiness from the Deadeye Ascendancy point there. So that is kind of the nut and bolts of why I chose to go Raider. Plus, I just like Raider, and I like moving fast. To me, again, I iterated this point in part 1. It is very important to me that your character moves really fast in the hideout. And it's not just about being in the hideout, it's about being in the map when things go south, or when things just kind of stop happening and you're just looting the map. How fast are you moving in that process? Because that is part of the mapping process, and you're not always going to be in combat whenever you're mapping. You're just not. You can see my movement speed here is 105% by default. With Quicksilver, it's 177. With Withering Step, it goes all the way up to 219 max. Now, I could have more movement speed in a few different ways. I could, for example, get movement speed from a better Brutal Restraint. I will be on the lookout for a better one of those here towards the season end. But for now, those are the numbers. This is the final gearing that I have, and I mean, you can just literally see how fast I'm moving. I've had plenty of people commenting whenever I go to other people's hideouts and I do trades. They quite often ask me, how in the world do you move that fast in my hideout? And that's how. So Goldworm only has 10% increased movement speed, so I'm kind of sacrificing or leaving a much to be desired in that case, but I am going Magic Find, so of course I have to have some of the best gear, Magic Find gear that I can. At least I have to make some smart, intelligent choices. Now you'll see right off the bat, just looking at all the gear that I have, you can obviously tell that I'm not going all in on Magic Find. I'm not using the gloves, I'm not using the chest, I'm not using the Ultra Glass Cannon Amulet. Of course, I'm going Omniscience because it's just so powerful. Omniscience is not being changed, by the way, from 3.17 to 3.18. Everybody was sure of it. They were sure it was going to get changed in some way, shape, or form, but it's not. So definitely going to be going Omniscience in 3.17, like regardless of what kind of build I went. I think, assuming go Elemental build. Okay, so important to point out that when I made this character and I switched over to Tornado Shop from Toxic Rain, I had basically all my gear completely in place. The only piece of gear that I really didn't have in place was the quiver. Now I can't show you my backup quiver, but the quiver I had was significantly worse than this one. It wasn't a synth. It didn't have like the synth mod or Bose Tech additional arrow. This is an incredible quiver. The synthesis mods alone are worth almost a mirror, and then of course it was crafted to absolute perfection. So I'm not sure why I'm starting with this piece of gear, but anyway, we'll just start right here. It's quite literally perfect, I think, on its rolls, on its divine rolls. And then you'll see it has a wonky 35 lightning resistance on it, instead of attack speed. Of course, the original version had attack speed, benchcraft on there. I don't know why in the world would I put 35 lightning resistance on it. That seems kind of crazy. Well, because I have 78% lightning resistance with that, and I don't have any other place to get it unless I do some significant changes to my gear. But I didn't want to do that, so I didn't mind losing 12% attack speed or whatever. As you can see, losing 12% attack speed was not that big of a deal. Still attacking insanely fast. So now, if that had been on the weapon, and it had been like 12% attack speed to the core attack speed of the weapon, that would be one thing. But it's just a global attack speed buff. So its value is diminished greatly by all the passive points and the onslaught effect and everything anyway, so not super important. What is super important is that you cap your lightning resistance. That's far more important. So it may seem kind of crazy that I would spend a mirror on an item that has a benchcraft of 35 lightning resistance, but I did because I knew that this was basically finishing my gear. This is actually the last piece of gear upgrade that I got. We'll go ahead and move over to the other very exciting item, which is a mirrored synthesis spine bow. If you're not aware, Path of Math had made a lot of mirror tier items this league. His first one was an elemental variation of the bow that had the bow attacks fire additional arrow synth mod on it, and it was a thicket bow, and it was basically triple tier 1 prefix elemental damages, fire, cold, and lightning, and those values are higher this league than any other league before because of some core changes to bow modifiers that were taking place. So everybody was excited to try that. I almost went that route. I almost bought that bow, but upon consulting him and a few other people, it had occurred to me that doing a physical to elemental conversion was just going to be so much more damage in maps with Headhunter buffs in particular. And again, here we go. That's going to be another big change moving into 3.18 with Headhunter buffs. We don't know for sure. But as far as I know, there isn't any physical to elemental gained as extra elemental damage, I should say, going into the next season as far as stolen Headhunter buffs. Not sure, but so far it doesn't seem like there probably will be. Of course, physical gained as extra elemental is still a fantastic stat. I mean, I use this Flask, for example, so this Flask is, of course, a very, very good defensive Flask in its own right, but it's an exceptional Flask for offensive purposes too, if you can make the most out of it, which my character does. So, I'm not going to talk about the gem links in this yet. We'll get to that after getting all the gear out of the way, but you can see that it's divined almost perfectly. I wasn't in control of the divines at all. It has essentially the 6 best rolls you could possibly ask for. The attack speed is super important on the bow, on the weapon, because it changes its default attacks per second, and then is affected by all the other global modifiers accordingly. It even has physical modifiers that have 8% increased effect, enchant on it. So it really doesn't get any better than this for a physical to cold conversion bow weapon. That's as good as it gets. So I paid a mirror and a 50x fee for this. So there we go. This build is already... Oh, yeah, I paid a mirror and a 140x fee for this quiver, actually. That was kind of overpriced on the fee. So we're already looking at, like, well over 2 mirrors in just 2 items there. So, of course, you know, the build was incredibly expensive. That's why I had to make 10 to 20x an hour all season, so I could afford it. No problem. Let's get into some of the other items next. Let's see, I think I will talk about the gloves next. So the gloves are an interesting one. I care very deeply about the implicits on gloves. They're exceptionally strong. I really like maximum frenzy charges as a raider, of course, but even without any kind of major synergy with it, with its ascendancy point that I did not get. Frenzy charge is still great because it's kind of like its own multiplier of damage anyway. So I always want to have that on my glove implicit if I can. Now the other implicit I have, I rotated some because obviously with this item I have many choices. So this item right here is actually quite an undesirable item, all things considered, throughout the season. Definitely one of my most controversial choices. Definitely super against the grain of the meta. You won't find, I don't even know if you'll find a single person who has a character like mine that is using these gloves. The main reason I'm using these gloves is because they give rampage. Now, there are a few different gloves that give rampage, but this one, in my opinion, was the best. I might use some of the other ones if I could have got my hands on some well-rolled ones that also had the 2 specific double implicits that I wanted, but I couldn't be that picky with the other gloves. So if I wanted the exact 2 implicits I wanted, and you'll learn why here when I get into the gem links, why I wanted +1 level of socketed gems in these here when I talk about the gems, but for now, you know, these are still good. They actually have a decent amount of armor and evasion. They have a good life roll as well, and 4% reduced mana cost per endurance charge is actually pretty decent too, considering I have 4 endurance charges, and you know, my mana when I get the ball rolling and I have tons of Headhunter buffs, mana is not an issue at all. But it's early on in the run process when I don't have a lot of buffs, mana can be a little bit of an issue, especially on maps rolled with less recovery, or obviously if you cannot regenerate mana, or if you cannot leech. That's where this modifier helps a little bit. So yeah, Rampage is the big reason though. I don't get anything out of the socketed gems supported by level 5 concentrated effects. That has nothing to do with the item. I wish I could substitute that modifier or find some way to make use of that, but I haven't figured out a way to do that. Obviously, I'm running Headhunter, and now, kind of a sad story here. Later on at the end of the season, I double corrupted a total of 18 Headhunters. Got extraordinarily unlucky. Only 5 of them lived. 3 of them did nothing, and 2 of them double corrupted. Only 1 of them double corrupted anything good, and I still have both of them here. So I've had this one on sale for a mirror forever. I don't think anybody's buying it. Nobody cares. And I've had this one. I can't even sell this one for like 5x above the default price for some crazy reason. Not sure why, but the Headhunter market is extraordinarily dry at this time of the season, I guess. So I'm just going to end the season a little with a slight letdown of not being able to have a nice double corrupted Headhunter. Not even a semi-nice one. That's okay. That'll be a goal of mine next season, I guess, if I use Headhunter. Obviously, I'll use some kind of high-end belt, maybe a Mage Blood, I don't know. But so far, I'm guessing I'll probably use a Headhunter, just as a wild guess right now. The boots I already mentioned. Now, I do have a double corruption on here that I really like. Or I take that back. Actually, one corruption on here I really like. Maximum endurance charges. Now, I double corrupted a ton of these boots, probably about 100 of these or so, and I got it very unlucky in that I never even got a really good double corruption that I wanted on these. I also had to divine a lot. I blew a lot of divine orbs, pulling these up to 20% increased quantity items found, throwing them into the double corruption chamber, and this was like the second or third one that even hit maximum endurance charges, and I finally said, screw it, okay. It actually gave me a useful, technically useful double corruption, but I would have much rather had movement speed, of course. That's the one I was really hoping. So I would love to have maximum endurance charge and movement speed. That would be my dream. I suspect next season I will probably achieve that, because I was a little late to the party. I was, there are actually a lot of these double corrupted floating around on trade early on in the league, and I kind of missed that train. So next league I won't miss that train, and I will be around with a live search waiting to find the perfect goldworm boots. So 4 maximum endurance charges, super important to me. I think endurance charges are very underrated. I think people ought to use them. There's also a bonus reason why I use them as one of my 4 links, which we'll get into later on when I discuss the links. I am running 2 pariahs, pretty self-explanatory. A lot of people who have a build kind of like mine have to use at least one Ventur's Gamble. Like this, for example. They have to use at least one of these in order to cover the resistance issues, because if you're going Omniscience and you're running a bunch of Magic Find, you're not going to have enough stat stacking to reach maximum elemental resistances on your own, evidenced by my decision on the quiver here. So one thing I could have done is I could have ran a Ventur's Gamble, and that would have been a decent choice actually, because Ventur's Gamble is pretty good. Definitely gives a lot of rarity. It cannot give you 15% quantity though, and since my focus is primarily divination card farming, quantity is basically everything. In my opinion, 5% extra quantity is worth more than 100% extra rarity. I mean, when I look at all the currency per hour I make, a great deal of it is in the divination cards and the raw currency. Neither of those are affected at all by rarity, and rarity is only affected by the uniques. Well, I did get a couple of unnatural instincts. I did get a Mage Blood once this season, but aside from those massive hits, most uniques are really worth not all that much. There are a few that are worth. I mean, my last farming session I have right here, Aegis Aura is pretty good. These Garakan's Flight. So there is some good reason to run Magic Find. I do have some decent ones here, but overall, I do have Brotherhood, 2 badges of the Brotherhood in here. But overall, it's kind of a drop in the bucket, actually, in comparison to the grand scheme of things, how much currency per hour making. Uniques just never make up a large portion of that. That was different, definitely, in Scourge League. So in Scourge League, we got the double dipping multiplier for rarity and quantity. There was a much greater incentive to go rarity. Now, I don't know, Sentinel, how that's going to work out yet, but probably quantity of items is going to be at least like 10 times more valuable than rarity. So I do like going the pariah. I also like having the extra gem slot. I don't have to use the extra gem slot, but I do like it. The first gem I would remove is one of the enhanced supports. I actually have 2 separate enhanced supports on my 4 links, so again, I don't have to have it. One of the enhanced supports I do feel like I need to have, but this one right here, which we'll revisit my boots later on the gem link there, I don't have to have that, so I can have that. I also don't have Blood Rage. Now, depending on how my my passive skill tree is set up. If I get Frenzy Charge on hit for marked targets, if I choose that wheel, if I have, like I have currently right now with this here, 5% chance to gain a Frenzy Charge on kill, where I was specifically targeting Brutal Restraints that gave that modifier. That means I don't need to run Blood Rage. I really don't like Blood Rage because Blood Rage does is it's a major problem on maps where I have reduced recovery or no regeneration. It causes a lot of problems, and I either can't run it or I can't really run those maps. So I just don't like having a sort of default degeneration if I can avoid it. Otherwise, Blood Rage is great. So I think it's a good gem, because it's extremely powerful and has a really nasty downside. Even though I do have probably a lot of regeneration, maybe to make up for it, but especially with certain map mod roles, it's already bad enough that I have to like check for a few other map modifier roles that I can't handle it. So anyway, let's move on. We got Crystallized Omniscience. Now I ran through a few different versions of this, depending on. I'll show you. I can actually show you my latest one. This is the one I was using before. So of course, one of the greatest things about this is because Omniscience was so common, and because it's obviously high enough item level to give a quantity of items double corruption potential, and tons of people double corrupting them because they're actually after percent stats, not quantity of items in particular. There's actually a lot of these floating around for fairly cheap, and you can get a 5% increased quantity of items. Found one at certain points, you can get it for 10x or less, at least with just that one. And now I had Determination. I was running Determination, so of course that was valuable to me. But eventually I found this one. I think I paid like 40x for it, if I'm not mistaken. Oh yeah, I paid 120x for the Headhunter. I paid almost nothing for the gloves, almost nothing for the boots, except the double corrupting a ton of these. Pariahs actually do cost basically nothing. So again, still sitting under 3 mirrors, even counting everything so far. I do believe my build, the total value of my build, is probably around 3 mirrors, especially if you consider the fact that I double corrupted tons of chests and boots to get my own because nobody else was doing it. They weren't available. But anyway, this is a terrific double corruption. It's not perfect, of course, but it's a Match Finder's elemental attack skill dream, this particular Omniscience. So let's move on. We got the chest here. Now this is one of the big controversial decisions. This all ties into my decision to go the Onslaught increased effect route, and I will revisit this, of course. Right here, this Ascendancy Point Avatar of the Chase. Get big Onslaught increased effect there. You get a little bit from the smaller nodes. You get permanent Onslaught from Rapid Assault. You can get even more of it down here, which I sometimes went for this route too, but not in this case.
My mana is gone.
But yeah, this rolls all the way up to 100 on the chest. What I was doing is I was divining tons of these, and I would get them up to 6 sockets, but not 6 links, and then I would double corrupt them. Eventually, finally hit one that was decent. I was mandating that I get a percent increased damage roll, and then I wanted the second one to at least be something valuable. I kind of would have liked +1 socketed gems would have been good. Percent life would have been fine. 50% damage reduction to crits would have been great. Actually would have been preferable over this even. +1 to all max res is good. However, it's not actually as good for me as it is for most people, because I quite often cap out on max res anyway when I get a major resistance shrine. That already gives me over 90% max all res. It caps out at 90% max all res. I quite often get the minor shrine, which is like puts me up to 80% max all res, I think. But anyway, it's kind of nice to have the 1% all max res. Certainly is valuable. A good stat in its own right. So I was also buying ones that were at least decent on the default armor. So this is a nice armor roll. We need to talk about this item actually. Why did I pick this item? Okay, so I want you to look at the rolls here. I want you to actually, let's go through here and actually examine each and every roll and compare its value to another high-end chest. Now the highest end chest, secondary chest I could probably have would be like the breach chest, which is escaping my name. I don't even have any left to sell. Sorry for getting his name. You know what chest is. 100% increased global defenses. And then people fracture that, and then they can use the Eldritch implicits, Eldritch crafting to make it really good. Increased aura effects, whatnot. Certainly a fantastic chest. But for this chest, there's actually a couple mods in here that are completely useless to me that would be useful for a lot of people, such as 0.5% physical attacks damage leached as life. That does not count because apparently the conversion is calculated first, so I don't do any physical attack damage, even though I do actually do a lot of physical attack damage pre-conversion, but apparently this is post-conversion check, so I don't get any value out of that. So I'm told. You gain onslaught for 5 seconds per endurance charge when hit. Now, that would be really valuable for me, except I have permanent onslaught anyway. So you might think, well, there's 2 that are gone down the drain. You know, is it really that good? You also have a downside on this chest. You lose all endurance charges when hit. So that's kind of bad. There's a small cluster jewel that some people use to get their endurance charges. For rangers, getting endurance charges is actually really annoying. You kind of have to have the... you have to have like a rare ring with the veiled suffix, gain endurance charge, 4% chance on kill, something like that. Or some people take the small cluster jewel that gives you endurance charge when hit, like once every second or so, however many seconds, anytime you get hit, which is good. But that costs some passive skill points and a jewel slot as well to do that. So I got it here on the chest. The nice thing about the chest is, let's examine it line for line. So with the chest, I get implicits, 40% to 50% increased damage. That's obviously a premium stat roll. That's easily a tier 1 stat roll, or more, if anything. +1 max all res is obviously at least the value of a tier 1 roll. 220% increased armor and evasion. It's actually 2 tier 1 prefixes, better than 2 tier 1 prefixes. Because they only go up to 100%. So that's huge right there, especially for a high tier armor. Full dragon scale is a good base armor, especially if I am stacking armor and evasion, which I am, because I'm using grace and determination. You get actually precisely the benchcraft prefix roll 85 max life, which is obviously good, not the best, but it's good. You get gain endurance charge on kill. Now, to me, of course, that's better than... Of course, gaining an endurance charge on kill, but losing endurance charge on hit for any character running grace or with a lot of dodge, that's obviously very good. It's cool. It's a very interesting interaction. So basically, this chest is only decent for someone who has a lot of evasion and or dodge. You gain onslaught, okay, and then 96% increased onslaught effect. And now this is the big one. So I've already got at least 6 tier 1 affixes essentially in this chest, if you count the implicits as well. If you don't count the implicits, I'm still sitting pretty on 4, right? Or 3, I guess 3, not counting the health one. 96% increased onslaught effect gets rounded down to 95%, and what that gives me is 19% increased movement speed and 19% increased attack speed. Now, what would the stat weightings of those be on any piece of gear? 19% increased attack speed is greater than a tier 1 roll on any item. So that's like a tier 1.5 tier 1 suffixes. 19% increased movement speed is even better, because you can only get that on like hunter modified prefixes up to 10%. So that's essentially 2 tier 1 affixes, in my opinion. So one line on this chest is basically giving me like 3.5 tier 1 modifiers, in my opinion. Again, if you have 100% uptime on Onslaught. Now, if you didn't have 100% uptime on Onslaught and you were running a Deadeye, for example, that wouldn't be the case. So it wouldn't really have that much value, but for me it does. And this is why I move this fast in the hideout without any flasks, and I attack this fast in the hideout. If I take that chest off, and if I remove the ascendancy point here, I am suddenly super slow. I'm just like crawling at that point. So it is an incredible boost to my survivability, to my damage, to my overall efficiency, to everything. And I really, really, really like this chest. Again, assuming that you're running a character that has a lot of evasion, which I do. Now, unfortunately, when you get hit, still counts for spells. So I don't have spell dodge, but at least I'm a ranged class, and I kill God knows how many monsters per second on average. So it's really not that big of a deal. The only time it sucks is whenever, there are basically no monsters left on the screen and there's just a couple beyond bosses floating around and I'm looting stuff. Of course, I'm more vulnerable then. I'm not going to have endurance charges in that situation. But as far as just generally mapping, that's going to be up pretty much all the time. And there is an interesting synergy here between the chest and the gloves. Well, it says gain rampage while at maximum endurance charges. So I'm always going to have rampage because I'm always going to at least hit maximum endurance charges just extremely frequently while mapping. So those two work out very nice together. You can't really wear these gloves if you don't have endurance charges, obviously. So yeah, that's the story on the chest. I definitely wanted to spend a little extra time on the chest because it's one of the most meta-defying decisions that I made, and it is sort of the linchpin to my decision to go Raider instead of Deadeye. There's a whole lot going on there about that, so that's a big decision that I made. Now, one of the reasons I did that is because I was already running Toxic Rain Raider, and I love this chest for that reason. So that is how I sort of arrived at the place where I was thinking about this chest. Not like I just thought of this chest out of thin air. No, it's because I was using it with the Toxic Rain Raider, and I got to thinking, well, what chest do I want to use instead of this? And I started thinking of all the different options. Like, well, I do this, then I got to do that, and then, there's this factor, and there's that, and I'm going to run slower. I'm going to be slower in the hideout. So there's a great deal of thinking that went into that process, and I ultimately decided to just stick with the chest. And just stick with Raider. Okay, that was a lot. So again, we just got one item left. It's the goal. Oh my goodness, how many times have I talked about that? Well, I gotta talk about it one more time, don't I? One more time. Do you know how good shrines are? Because if you don't, then you should probably learn how good they are. Just watch any one of my farming videos and watch me pick up a bunch of shrines in the map and see what happens to my character, because it's just absolutely stupid how good that is. With or without the Headhunter, this helmet is so good. It's actually going to be even better next season. I don't want to talk about this in too much detail, but as you're all aware, the Headhunter effectively received a pretty significant nerf, probably by virtue of changing modifiers from Nemesis to Arch Nemesis. So what was already competing with Headhunter in terms of power spike? The goal in conjunction with shrines in the Atlas passives and going like Domination on the map, or Gloom Shrine, obviously. That was already, at the very least, competing with the power potential of what Headhunter had to offer. Now, of course, in my opinion, when I'm running through a map and I have 100 if I had to choose between 100 Headhunter buffs at this iteration of the game versus 3 major shrine effects, I would choose 100 Headhunter buffs. That's absolutely more powerful. But if I had to choose between 10 Headhunter buffs and 3 major shrine effects, I would choose 3 random major shrine effects, probably, over 10 Headhunter buffs, because I think that's just going to be on average more power overall, especially if I can control a Gloom Shrine, and I get that as an option. It's just incredible. So what I'm trying to say is, however strong you think shrines are this season, as far as the absolute pinnacle of power creep and progression, well, they just got even better, because Headhunter got worse. So when I'm mapping, shrines last about 2 minutes. 2 minutes and 5 seconds, I think. A major shrine lasts 2 minutes, 5 seconds, and a minor shrine effect, which spawns from this helmet, lasts 50 seconds. And the speed shrine is one of them. The speed shrine gives, I think it was 12% increased movements, or 12% increased action speed, something like that. I forget off the top of my head, but obviously extremely good. So that is why I've elected to do this, and this is extraordinarily meta-defying. at this point. You're not going to see any other tornado shot player using the Gull Helm. You're just not going to see it. I don't know why. I can't imagine these people are spending much longer than 2 minutes in a map anyway. I don't know what else they're using their passive skill points on that's so good, but that was my decision. That's what I went with, and it is easily one of the least regrettable decisions I've made all season, going that. There were a number of other content creators. I'm not the first person to, praise the Gloom Shrine or the Gull and all that. I'm certainly not the first, but I may be the last, because I'll never stop talking about it. It's just so good. The double corruption I have on here, one great thing about this item is that it's fairly common and quite often comes out of divination card, double corrupted already, right? And so it's pretty easy. To, at the very least, get the implicit socketed skill gems, get a 90% cost reservation multiplier. That is a huge luxury that high-end rares don't have, or even like really high-end uniques that are expensive. Again, the implicits for helmet are exceptionally good, and you'll probably notice there's a common theme with my gear. Is that, what do I have? I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 unique items that have very specialized double corruptions, with the exception of the boots. One of the corruptions on the boots I don't really care that much about, but with the exception of that, all the other ones are extremely good. Plus 2 levels to a socketed AoE gems combined with the cost reservation multiplier is extraordinarily strong, and I mean, my goodness, who knows how many tier 1 affixes that double corruption is worth in this situation. But anyway, it's obviously not about that for this item. It's about 50% increased duration of shrine effects, 75% increased effect of shrine buffs on you, create a lesser shrine effect when you kill an enemy with a 20-second cooldown. Oh, and getting some extra evasion, life, and cold resistance isn't bad either. I didn't mention this before, but the reason I have 35 lightning resistance here and I don't have to worry about the other resistances is because I get fire res on the boots, I get cold res on the helmet, and that means the only res I'm missing is lightning res, so that's why I have to put it there. I wish there was a rampage gloves that gave lightning res. That would that would be nice. Okay, so that is all about the gear. So extremely meta-defying, some pretty crazy things going on here. Only 4 magic find pieces, counting the omniscience implicit, for a total of 55% increased quantity of items found, and 25% increased rarity of items found on the neck. Let's go to flasks. We'll start off with the gold flask. So I get a great deal of rarity here. Now, there are plenty of other different flasks I could use for power, and if I'm having issues next season with Headhunter being super weak and Shrines not being good enough, well, obviously I'll sub out this flask for something else. I really hope I don't have to, though, because I'm already going to be losing, probably... Oh yeah, that reminds me. I am probably going to be losing item rarity support, and I forgot I need to actually switch that back in here, which forces my main ability to have a 5 link as opposed to a 6 link. I suspect I'm going to be losing a fair bit of power creep due to the Headhunter nerfs, and I will probably not be running item rarity support in my primary link for that reason, which means getting some rarity on the flask is going to be even more potent. So I hope I get to keep this flask here, and let's see if we can trigger the number down here. Increased rarity of items dropped by slain monsters 205%, drops down to 125, so you can see that it was giving me a total of 80% because of the alchemist variation. So it is 60 plus an extra 25% increased effect, plus 10% increased effect here, plus 10% increased effect here, which is up basically all the time. I guess in that case here, let's see what I can get my ultimate number of. So it's 125, and if I trigger all my flasks at once... Okay, there we go. 211. So I have 211 percent. 211% rarity at the very top end for my gear. So that's good to know. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish off the flasks. For a second there, I was using the flask off of the Cortex boss. So weird, I'm forgetting the name of it. I never forget the name of that one. But anyway, you know what it is. It drops consecrated ground on the ground, and that was a terrific flask for Toxic Rain, for example. But clearly Dying Sun is better, especially once you can maintain it 100% uptime. There is no benefit to increased flask effect for Dying Sun, so that's unfortunate. Apparently there is, if you could hypothetically get enough to give yourself 3 additional projectiles. But yeah, I think you'd have to have over 50% increased flask effect to do that. I looked into that for like a split second and realized that there's no way that would be worth it. Okay, so we already talked about the gold flask, talked about the Quicksilver flask. There's no way in hell I would ever change this. This is going to be the best, obviously. Alchemist Quicksilver Flask of the Cheetah. Tier 1 all day long, baby. Used when charges are full across all of these, by the way. So I never have to click a single flask. Typically when I enter the map, I do click Q and T at the same time. So I enter the portal and I go, and then I'm like, pew, like this, and then firing, killing stuff, and then I never have to touch flasks again, at all. Yeah. Taste of Hate. Now here is something a little bit meta-defying as well. Beyond me, why a physical to cold conversion tornado shot player of any kind wouldn't use Taste of Hate. With the possible, actually, even if I was using Mage Blood, this would probably be my last flask. I think this one is actually even better than Dying Sun. Maybe. Maybe not. I don't know. I have to think long and hard about that one. But don't underestimate 15% physical gained as extra cold. That is a lot of extra damage. Well, hell, let's see here. Let's see if I can kind of pull it up here. So, obviously, the damage per second sheet is not representative of the true damage. By the way, the POB is linked down below if you want to see the more realistic damage. I do about 10 million DPS with all arrows out before any Headhunter buffs, which is kind of a low number, but that just goes to show how insanely powerful Headhunter buffs are. Sheet goes from 131 to 149. That's like 12% more damage. So that's pretty insane that did that. Obviously, if I click the Dying Sun, it can't register the number properly. But anyway, 15% damage from hits taken as cold damage during flask effect. I really, really like that too. And the implicit for this flask is 20% less cold damage taken. So that is a huge amount of damage reduction in its own right. It's good to have multiple layers of damage reduction. If you have Grace plus Determination plus Defiance Banner plus Taste of Hate, I mean, that's so much damage reduction. It's one of the reasons that you hardly ever see me die. Okay, and then there is... I should mention the chance to avoid being chilled and frozen. I mentioned this in part 1 of the video. I did show this flask for a second because I do have some implicits. I am able to essentially achieve 100% chill and frozen immunity while this flask is up without any implicits on my jewels, but I do have the frozen implicits anyway as a backup in case this flask is down. Alchemist Granite Flask of the Owl. So I have to have one flask that has the suffix of the owl. I'm not sure if or where... If I can see the number for curse reduction, I guess not. Anyway, it's something like 98%. I think with Alchemist Genius, it's actually 100% reduced effect of curses on me. So I'm immune to curse, basically, with Alchemist Genius, with just a couple points. So yeah, I mean, if we do the math, I mean, you do the math. 65% reduced effect combined with 45% increased effect. I'll just do that right now. So 65 times 1.45. Oh, okay, it's 94%. So I have 94% reduction to curses. I'm basically immune to curses at that point. Okay, and then, of course, the armor is nice. So I would love to have... I think I even have another flask in here. Yeah, this one right here. I would love to use this one, and I used it for a while. So one great thing about this stuff, this is so much more armor. Actually, it's actually insane how much more armor this is. So let me show you right here. it'll show me as having, okay, so I have 12k armor outright. That's just auras. When I use this flask, 17k. So that's a big number, right? Watch this, 25k. Whoa, so much more armor from the suffix increase armor during flask effect, and that's because my character is a ranger. Rangers on the passive skill tree don't get really hardly any sources. Actually, for my build, I get 0 sources of % increased armor, which is, you know, an extremely good modifier in small quantities because it's not being diluted by itself from a huge amount of it. So I don't have any of it. So if I could use it on the flask, I would love to do it, but I can't because obviously I'm going to use of the cheetah on the Quicksilver. I want to use the rarity on here. The major change, I think, the other options for me was, it was this. So using Alchemist Grand Flask of the Armadillo, and then Alchemist Gold Flask of the Owl. So that was an option there. And I think for a little while I did that. Actually, I haven't used this one in, well, ever, actually. I just bought it as a backup to craft a suffix on it, maybe? Not sure. Occasionally, I use this flask too, Enduring Eternal Mana Flask of the Order. So whenever I ran into a map that had Elemental Reflect, or cannot regenerate and cannot leech, those situations I would run this flask here. Now, you may not be aware, but even though I have awakened elemental damage with attack supports, and it says elemental damage from supported skills cannot be reflected, that does not make me immune to elemental reflect. Whenever I fire off arrows whenever I fire off arrows and I don't have enough mana for it to be a tornado shot arrows, I fire off normal arrows. 40% of that is converted to cold damage via this Watcher's Eye. Evidently, Elemental Reflect is so insanely powerful that a non-skilled attack with 40% damage conversion can reflect and one-shot me. Which is pretty damn hard to believe, but yeah, that does, apparently. So that's why. That was a huge point of contention midway through the league. I didn't understand. I started asking around all over the place. Why am I getting one-shot randomly in maps sometimes? And we finally figured out that's what it was. So in case you weren't aware, Tornado Shot with Anomalous, where you're converting and you have 100% physical to element damage conversion, but you also have immunity to Elemental Reflect, you can still die to Elemental Reflect when you fire off arrows that with not enough mana for it to be the skill effect. That's how it is. That's a perfect place to segue into the gems because we talked about all the gear and we talked about all the flasks. Now let's get into the gems and then this video will be over. Anomalous Tornado Shot. We'll start off right here with the main 6th link. Anomalous because I am going full damage conversion. There are a few other options. Pure Elemental Skills is going to use a different variation, a different quality for Tornado Shot, but for me, I'm going to use Anomalous for that reason. It's so wonderful. Now, a lot of people use a elemental conversion on gloves. The problem with that is it only goes up to 35 for one thing, which means you also have to take the Eldritch Implicit to convert the top end to give yourself a full 100% with Anomalous Tornado Shot and then 2 separate lines of conversion on the gloves. Or you can just put it on the Watcher's Eye. And now, this is not a super cheap modifier. It does definitely restrict the kind of Watcher's Eyes I can get. But for me, 40% is a perfect number on Watcher's Eye, and it's a range of 25 to 40%. So it takes a lot of Divine Orbs to hit something like this. Unfortunately, still just sitting there at 4% max life, but oh well. It's perfect. It's perfect because it's 100% physical to elemental damage, and it works out extremely well given Trinity support. How that works, I really like the dynamics of Trinity support, especially in the way I have this set up. So, 60% of my damage is fires, 60% of my damage is so there are 3 separate things that happen: 60% fire, 40% cold. 60% lightning, 40% cold, or 100% cold. So obviously with that, you can see that Trinity is going to be up 100% of the time. And the nice thing about that is the most impactful elemental ailment is freeze, which is a huge deal. One major driving factor that I didn't mention earlier about why you might choose physical to cold conversion is that you don't really see this while I'm mapping, but especially like beyond bosses, quite often just get completely frozen in their tracks. They're never even able to cast or do anything. Especially given that a lot of my shots come out as 100% cold damage, so a very high, very strong freeze ratio in terms of elemental ailments. And yet I still get to shock enemies as well because of some of it being lightning, and to a much lesser important factor, I get to ignite enemies too, but that doesn't really matter. So Trinity support, already extremely good damage in here, one of the best you'll see in the POB. It is definitely one of the highest damage ones, and it's especially good for my setup. Awaken elemental damage, attack support's pretty good. It's not one of the highest damage ones, but it's very good. But one of the main reasons to pick this is, of course, the immunity to reflect when you have enough mana to use the ability. Next, we'll talk about inspiration support. This is pretty mandatory for this build if you don't want to use a mana flask. You can see mine is 9 mana. And that's with a Replica Conqueror's efficiency, but no other sources of reduced mana cost. So one way I could get around this issue of sometimes dying to Elemental Reflect because I'm running out of mana is that I could just have a ring with minus mana, or especially if I had 2 rings with minus mana cost, I would have a free Tornado Shot. But I'm running a Magic Find hybrid, so I can't do that. So that's why I have to run Replica Conquerors and all the works. Inspiration support is a marginal amount of increased damage, but the main reason you're using this is to dramatically reduce the cost of... let's just see what happens when I throw this vicious support projectile back in here. Suddenly it's 26 mana. Okay, so it's quite a bit more. Incidentally, for the full 6th link, I would be using vicious projectile support for the damage conversion. It's a huge amount of damage. It's really good. 60% more physical projectile attack damage is a really big number for the physical conversion damage modifier. It's definitely one of the best. But it gets removed when I want to run item rarity support, which is what I do on Cemetery when I'm already way overpowered. Anyway, the last link is Awaken Chain support. I tested Awaken Fork support and Chain support in great detail. Now, before I figured out to use Fork support or Chain support, I think I used this one, a 2120 increased critical strike damage support, which is decent. But no, clearly from a practical standpoint, Chain support is probably the best. Now, if you're running a Deadeye and you have Ricochet, a lot of them you'll see on PoE Ninja are running Fork support because they have Ricochet already. I suspect that Chain support's still better, even with that. I'm not a huge fan of Fork support. I prefer the targeting mechanism of Chain support. Fork support will get the job done okay, but there's some situations where you fire into a pack and almost nothing happens for some crazy reason, like the projectiles just seem to miss everything or just evade it slightly. With Chain support, it involves the targeting system. It does reduce your damage a little bit, technically, but 3 chains? That's actually like more damage than anything. Really. And of course there's the greater multiple projectiles, Awaken greater multiple projectile support, which I don't have on me right now, but that is something I will probably use actually next season, because I'm not going to get a ton of projectiles from Headhunter buffs anymore. So yeah, Awaken greater projectile, multiple projectile support might be back on the menu next time. We'll have to see. Certainly I will be using greater multiple projectile support at league start, because I'm just not even going to have the bow with increased projectiles or anything like that. So yeah, we'll see what I do, but I'll, next league it'll probably be the same thing, except substitute item rarity for vicious projectiles, substitute item rarity for greater multiple projectile support. Probably what it'll look like. It'll look like the same length except what I just mentioned right there. So that is the primary 6th link. Quiver has no links. Let's talk auras. Level 4 Enlightened support, of course, combined with the implicit here, means I get to really dunk on these 50% auras in a major way. I have no extra aura reductions specified for determination or hatred, but I do have 25% on grace down here. My auras are extremely tight on here. I can't afford My Immortal Call costs 37. I have 41. It was really like computer programming 101. You finally got the code to work to get everything to be exactly the way I needed it to manage the R's in here. So you can see a great deal of effort went into that. I gave a little bit of poggers when I saw on the reveal that we had now having Awakened Enlightened support. So I don't know what that means. I guess it's going to be an even better mana reservation. So that'll be nice. I can kind of loosen my my aura setup, perhaps. Now I was also running, instead of Grace, at one point I was running Sentinel of Purity. That gave me something like 15, I can't remember, it was like 15 or 20% more damage across the board, because it's its own multiplier physical damage increase, which pre-conversion, that was a lot of damage increase. But the problem is, I still had survivability issues, and one of the big issues was I would go through the maps not with my endurance charges a lot because I wasn't evading enough. So we can see here that my evasion chance is 80%. Okay, 80%. Now it's actually a lot more than that once you get into combat at all. But I mean, let's just see what happens when I remove Grace. 48%. Okay, that's like night and day. The difference between 48% and 80% chance to evade. That's so huge. Yeah. And the way I play Raider, I'm getting up in the face of everything. You know, I run up into a pack of monsters and I point blank them to death and stuff. So, I need that evasion. I really do. Okay. Yeah, Hatred, obvious choice. Oh my god, this is so much damage. It's easily the best damage, or one of the very best ones in the game for this setup. Cannot contend with that. You absolutely should run that if you can fit it in any way, shape, or form. Should run Determination for sure. I'd say the two mandatory ones here are Hatred and Determination. Try to get Grace in if you can. You really don't want to drop Defiance Banner, and you have to have Precision as well. So let's talk about those links here. I got Anomalous Defiance Banner. You know, it's just a lot of extra evasion and armor in its own right. I don't typically use the ability. Sometimes I do, but it is actually quite powerful to use if you use it at the right time. Precision, you can see here. This is a level 2120 gem. And it really does put me at just over the hit cap, main hand chance to hit. And you'll notice something interesting about my gear. Unlike virtually every meta Tornado Shot character, they all have a high tier attack rating roll on their quiver or their gloves, or maybe their helmet. I don't have to, because I have a level 23 precision combined with taking Master Fletcher and Acuity. And before I had a Brutal Restraint that gave me increased aura effect, whereas if I have a Brutal Restraint that gives me increased aura effect, I actually don't need this high of a precision. So that's something I'll be looking into the future as well, because it is hard on the mana reservation, you know, to go this high on it. But I do have 100%. I can't remember where that's at. Here it is. Precision has 100% increased mana reservation efficiency, mandatory for my setup. Okay, next I'm going to show the chest 6 link. So, interesting story about this one is I had a completely different 6 link in my chest. It was for Ballista Totem, Focus Ballista setup. Again, you know, I'm just kind of used to that whole thing with Caustic Arrow, Toxic Rain, Raider, and evidently, one thing that made Tornado Shot seem a little more seamless for me is that Focus Ballista Tornado Shot was a totally viable option, and it appeared to do about 20 to 30% of my total damage when all 3 totems were up and, you know, in play and optimal conditions, which usually isn't the case, but at least hypothetically, it was from a practical standpoint, it was probably at least, you know, 10 to 15% more damage when I really wanted it. But as you know, I move through the map incredibly fast, and while I can drop the totems down really quickly via 200 and something % increased onslaught effect, because onslaught effect does affect cast speed as well, so that is pretty cool. I did decide to make a change on that, and so what did I do? I went for the infamous Stone Golem and Animate Guardian setup. Now, I was already totally aware of Animate Guardian setups, and I had tried that in the past. It didn't go very well. Animate Guardian is pretty damn expensive. If you have one set up the way mine is set up, you can see my Animate Guardian in game right here. It looks kind of like the expensive ones with the Kingmaker and the Shadow Stitch helmet, or not Shadow, Demon Stitch helmet, rather. Let's actually go through here, and I'll show you the gear. I do have a backup set of gear here. So, Mask of the Stitch Demon. I mean, this is like a 3x helmet. Garb of the Ephemeral is like 1x. We're close to it. Mine has Wind Shriek boots and these gloves, so that actually gives me elemental weakness on hit, which does matter for bosses somewhat. And then Kingmaker is the big one. Having the 10% 10 plus 10 fortification, Culling Strike. Increased rarity is found, and then increased critical strike chance, and then increased multiplier. Or sorry, increased critical multiplier rather. All of those things are incredible, and obviously you can see by Fortify, I don't have that buff on me all that often. But anytime I'm standing still, he does play defensively, and I do generally have that buff on me anytime in which I do actually stand still. And sometimes I run so fast that the Animate Guardian teleports back onto me, so I do get the buff in those very short incremental moments when I teleport. So let's see, what is that 6th link? Well, it is essentially the Empower support, of course, and then the 3 most powerful minion support gems for defensive minions, keeping the minions alive. The focus here is just getting as much life, getting as much resistance, getting as much damage reduction as you possibly can. Elemental army support, minion life support, meat shield support, and that is what will kind of help keep the minions alive. Now, there is a 4th support gem that's decent, or you can run Summon Stone Golem, which, much to my surprise, is actually really, really, really good. Let's see how much life regeneration I have. This thing gives me 156 life regeneration, even though it only says 127, because I have increased effect, buff effect, thanks to it being anomalous. This is incredible. I mean, this is worth this is basically worth a fairly high rolled vitality gem without having to have the aura in. And the Stone Golem does die occasionally. It certainly dies more often than the Animate Guardian. At least the Stone Golem's survivability is pretty good. Pretty good, honestly. In any given map, I usually don't have to replace him. And my Animate Guardian, while I used to lose my Animate Guardian somewhat frequently in the beginning, I kind of learned how I had to play. And I had to just kind of play more, focusing more on moving, playing a little more defensively, not, especially on Delirium maps, just not running into like a crazy amount of monsters, getting stuck by Grasping Vines, and then before I know it, my Animate Guardian is dead. Not letting that happen very often. And now I can pretty easily go well over 100 maps farming without losing my Animate Guardian. I think my record is something like probably 400 or 500 maps without losing the Animate Guardian, and it does cost me about 5 exalts every time I lose him. So that sucks, and in the beginning that really did hurt. It really did affect my currency earning in the beginning when I wasn't very good at managing that, but now that I am, it's terrific. And I also dropped Culling Strike. I did have Culling Strike on the marked targets before, so getting Culling Strike from the Kingmaker, at least occasionally, is a pretty big deal. Super nice, and I do get used to that sometimes, when I run into a Beyond boss after clearing the map, and then I'm standing there, I get up in their face and point blank nuke them here, and guess what? My Animate Guardian is near me, so I'm getting Culling Strike and all the benefits of that, and Garb of the Ephemeral also does a few things I didn't mention before. Let's see here. So this helps a lot with Delirium Hands. Delirium Hands really don't affect me because, unlike Grasping Vines, Delirium Hands actually affect your action speed. So nearby allies' action speed cannot be modified below base value. Super strong. And also, nearby enemies cannot deal critical strikes is really strong. Again, if you're in like one of those point blank moments where I'm trying to shotgun a boss or a Beyond boss or something. So I really, really like the Animate Guardian overall. I think it in combination with the mana regeneration from Stone Golem really does put it above what a 6-link Ballista Totem setup is. But I'd be curious to see what you might have to say about that. What do you think? Do you think Animate Guardian is a good choice here? Because it's a little bit peculiar. On PoE Ninja, that is how I found out about it, about this particular 6-link. So there are some other people doing it. And yeah, I think it's pretty good, but I do suspect there might be some better options there. It is an entire 6-link you have to work with. So I'm curious to hear what you guys think, if you think there's a better option for that. But that is how I came to arrive with that option. This is actually the last sort of major change to my links in my gear that I made. I made this decision somewhere around 1 month ago, I think. Yeah. Okay, we're almost getting done, aren't we? Let's see. Let's go to the boots. Sniper's Mark and Divergent Mark on hit support. If you weren't aware, this doesn't even have to be linked to your main hand ability to work. Sniper's Mark is insane. It says here, so it just automatically puts Sniper's Mark on the target, and then making projectiles split when they hit them. I can't remember how many. Oh yeah, 5 additional targets. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. It's just like getting so much extra effective damage while you're mapping. And if you're Deadeye with Ricochet, it's extremely strong, or Deadeye with the other Ascendancy for snipers as well. You can also, for a moment there, I had this down here where I got increased damage, increased effect, and cull against marked enemies, as well as chance to gain a frenzy charge when you hit a marked enemy. And that's what I did until I got the Brutal Restraint node for frenzy charge on kill. But that is a supremely good setup, even for Raider, where I'm not getting any kind of terrific synergy from marks. It's just so good. Definitely recommend. Certainly better than just running Elemental Weakness or something like that. Divergent Withering Step. Okay, so here's another one that a lot of people are running Dash. So the reason I don't run Dash is because my character runs so fast that I can't even control that. I can't control that. Now, it would be a decent choice to do whenever I get inflicted with Grasping Vines. Apparently, in 3.18, one major nerf to the games was a nerfed Grasping Vine effect, so it's not going to be as big of an issue, I think. Shroud Walker also negates Grasping Vines anyway. So, yeah, 2 ways to negate Grasping Vines. Move extraordinarily fast, or get Shroud Walked. It's a Headhunter buff, which will no doubt still be in the game in Arch Nemesis, I suspect. Yeah, so that's there like that. Now, I had mentioned earlier that this enhanced support gem is probably the first one I would substitute out, so I do have kind of an open gem slot. I could put something else in here. But this is nice in that it increases the likelihood that my... elusive doesn't get removed when I use an ability. But even at 46% chance, let's be real here. The speed at which I attack, this thing gets removed almost instantly. I really wish there was a way to get Ashes of the Star in some combination with Enhanced Support. Maybe if you have like Awakened Enhanced Support with Ashes of the Star, you can somehow get to 100% chance not to remove the buff on skill use, because that would be insane. If you could get, this would be one of the super ultra broken things if you could manage to get 100% chance not to remove elusive on skill use. But anyway, enhanced support also increases the power of Sniper's Mark a fairly bit. So it says 40% increased damage. No, it says 41, so it's 6% increased damage. It's whatever. There's a few different... I could put Blood Rage in here. I could put a few other things, but for now... enhanced support. Oh, I could put Purity of Sentinels if I could somehow fit it in there. Okay, now let's talk about the most interesting. I saved the best for last. So this is the most peculiar 4-link that I have. Anomalous Mortal Call. Now most people run either Steel Skin or... Wow, that's weird. Totally forgetting the other one. The other guard skill. The one that has to do with armor. And then the monsters take damage. It's so weird that I randomly forget these when I'm making the video. You know what it is. It is the primary one for any armor-based class, which I am. I'm armor-based class, going major armor roll on the chest, going Determination, Defiance Banner. People typically don't go Immortal Call. In that case, they do For God's sakes, I can't believe I can't remember the name of it. Hopefully you guys all know what it is. 3 guard skills: Steel Skin, Immortal Call, and that one is the one that most people use. I haven't really tested it thoroughly enough to know for sure. But my biggest issue with that is it does not apply in any way, shape, or form to spell damage. The biggest threat to my life in this game is spell damage, even with 100% spell suppression.
My mana is gone.
I mentioned this in part 1 of the video. I have 100% spell suppression, yet I don't have a single piece of gear that has spell suppression on it because I have it all over the tree, and I have it on a major ascendancy point. And I don't need it anywhere on gear, which gives me a tremendous luxury to run these uniques with very specific targeted corrupted implicits and specific unique modifiers like increased onslaught effect or magic fine pieces in general. So yeah, I don't like the other guard skill because this one gives less elemental damage taken, 35% less elemental damage taken. Now the anomalous version of this gem is extremely expensive, and this gem kind of represents a more evasion focus. So Steel Skin is what energy shield focused characters use usually. Immortal Call is what evasion based characters use usually, and then other one is what armor based characters use usually. But I am evasion and armor, so I can kind of choose, I guess. The reason evasion is important for this one is because you need to have, well, for me in this case, particularly with the, so there's an interesting interaction going on with Daros's Defiance and then Immortal Call. So sometimes I'm going to use Immortal Call. It's on my left click, by the way. And sometimes I'm going to use Immortal Call when I don't have any endurance charges, because I haven't killed anything yet, or because it so happened that exact moment when I had lost them from being hit, and then that happens sometimes, obviously, but most of the time I'll have a lot of endurance charges, and if I have 4 endurance charges, I am actually immune to physical damage during this time, I believe, reading how it works anyway. Then I have 35% less elemental damage taken for its time. So let's see, what is the uptime on that? Well, let's see here. Well, I'm going to take the enhance out, and you can see the cooldown there, right? Cooldown looks pretty fast with anomalous. You can see with no endurance charges, it's only up for about 2.5 seconds. With endurance charges, it's obviously up a lot longer. Okay, I have anomalous increased duration support for even more increased skill effect duration there. And then I have enhanced support for a huge amount of cooldown reduction. Let's look at the cooldown again. Wow, it's a lot faster, isn't it? That's much faster in the cooldown. Now let's just go in here for a second, because I really do want to show you how incredible this is. Let's just see. I want you to get a feel for the uptime on it. Just watch that icon above me. Just see how long it's up. You can pretty easily see that it's up at least 50% of the time. Right? At least 50% of the time, I'd say.
My mana is gone.
So 50% of the time up front, I'm taking basically no physical damage, and I'm taking 35% less elemental damage. You tell me how good that is. I think that's actually unbelievably strong. And this is also a link that is actually better, even better for Toxic Rain, Caustic Arrow, because those are skills that already prioritize increased skill effect duration, and any kind of build that wants increased cooldown effect or whatever, less cooldown on abilities. That's going to be a really good link for them too. I also have haste, so I'm not using any kind of Val skill. So Val haste is super strong in this case. For me, it's just even more attack speed and movement speed while I'm mapping, and it is pretty good. It lasts a very long time, actually, a surprisingly long time, with the increased duration support. So that is it for all of the gems and the items. I probably forgot to say a few things, I'm not sure, but yeah, there's another deep dive. That is how I've arrived at this super end game character of mine, and I'm sure that, you know, there this game is really cool. There's so many different choices you can make, and I made some choices here. A lot of the choices I made were, I don't think out of laziness, but out of like an appreciation for how good the links were for Toxic Ray and Caustic Arrow League Start, and then I really just decided, you know what, I'm just going to stay with them because I really like those links, even though it maybe doesn't make quite as much sense to use a particular item or link with Tornado Shot as opposed to Toxic Rain. I would love to hear your recommendations, though, if you guys have other recommendations. What do you think, especially about the whole guard skill decision? I'm curious to hear what you guys think about that. If you've never given it a try, I recommend it. Give a try out for this 3 link in particular. Now, the other 4th link used to be efficacy support, but I had to enhance. Apparently, I realized was better. So, yeah. Particularly this 3 link, duration support, Immortal Call, and haste, Val haste. Really cool, really cool free link in my opinion. Yeah, thank you for checking out the video. I hope you guys like this. I wasn't really sure if there was a whole lot of demand for this kind of video, but you guys quite often ask me about the. I know there's a lot of people out here watching this. They see me play the character, they see it in action, they wonder how in the world was that possible, and they look at the POB and maybe they're not experts at dissecting a POB and understanding every little thing about it. So I wanted to share with you, my decision, the choices I made. It would have certainly helped me if I was an audience member, and my limited understanding about builds and POBs, if I had seen somebody really display it. I've sometimes wanted, when I come across a build I'm interested in trying, and I can't find a single person who kind of really gives a deep dive on why they made every single little decision they made on there, and talking about some of the alternatives, and maybe especially points of contention where the meta is being bucked, like in my build there. So wow, anyway, that was a long time talking. I hope you guys liked the video. I will see you around on the next video. Okay, bye for now.